Hello, child of God. That's something that this older white guy said to me when I was a 20 something year old guy on my spiritual journey, trying to reconcile some of the challenges I had in my Pentecostal church, High Margaret, that had invited me out. And I was still trying to make sense of where I was on my spiritual journey. And I was walking down the street in Monterey, California, and I passed this older white gentleman who greeted me with saying, "Hello, child of God." And I had never had a random person just say something to me like that. And so I got curious about this guy. His name was Bill Drake. He was a new thought kind of person. And he, after meeting me, took it upon himself to write a letter and send it to my base, which was right up the road. He didn't have my contact information. This was like in the early 2000s. We didn't have cell phones or anything, but he wrote me a letter and basically told me a lot of good things about myself. I don't know why. Maybe he just felt like being kind to a young black guy. Who knows? Hi, R.M. Lipkin. But basically, this man took it upon himself to write me a letter, tell me good things about myself. And he stayed in my life for years. And even though I wasn't in this new thought space that he was in, I was still a fundamentalist kind of Christian. He encouraged me, wrote me letters, came to visit me when I moved to other states. I don't know why. He just did. I have no reason why. But what I do know is Bill Drake had a profound impact on my life. He used to write science fiction and send me letters. He wrote me paper letters and all sorts of things. And this dude, for no reason, just entered into my life. And I had to be grateful for him because he chose to see in me what he wanted to see in the world. And in part because of how he chose to use his vision, his ability to project, because we all project, right? But he chose to project beauty onto me and onto everything around him. He once told me a story about how he was walking through the hood in DC coming from somewhere, and this black dude ran up behind him and he turned around and he greeted that guy the same way. He said, "Hello, child of God." And he said, the guy paused and then said, and he was like, "How may I bless you?" And then the guy said, "Listen, man, my friends are about to get you once you come around the corner. So I'm going to advise you to go this other way and stay safe." And he let Bill go. How crazy is that? But that's because Bill chose to see everybody as a child of God because he saw himself as a child of God. So he projected into the world what he saw in himself. Now we see a lot of crazy things happening in the world right now. A lot of people are divided. A lot of people are hating each other. A lot of people are treating people very terribly. And we're coming up with all sorts of creative ways to destroy and abandon our humanity. But I'm submitting to you that perhaps what we're projecting in the world is what we see in ourselves. If we don't see the love and the beauty and what I'm going to talk about in a second, which is the fullness of God in ourselves, then we're not going to put that out into the world as Bill did. So I'm calling this message today, Taught by God. And it starts off with a little story. When I was in kindergarten, I got pulled out of the classroom by my teacher, and she took me down the hall to discuss me being a disruption with my mom. And so they were standing over my heads, and I can still feel it over my head. And I can still feel it today. These two black women standing above my head, talking about me and arguing. And the teacher told my mom that I was a disruption and that the other kids felt bad around me. And the problem was that the teacher had asked, "Does anybody know what 2 plus 2 is?" And I'm like, 2 plus 2. And this is kindergarten. So I raised my hand. I said, "It's 4." She said, "Really good." I said, "Well, 2 times 2 is also 4." And then she said, "Well, that's great." And then I said, "So, and 4 times 4 is 16." And then she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "And 16 times 16 is 256. So can we move on to other things?" And my teacher was like, "What?" But see, my mom was a teacher and my grandma was a teacher. And the year before, I wasn't able to go to school because of my birthday being later in the school year. So my grandmother and mom taught me all this stuff. And so I went to school, to kindergarten, already knowing how to read, already knowing how to write, and already knowing my multiplication tables from flashcards for 16 times 16. And I thought all kids knew that. So I was like, why is the teacher telling us a bunch of nothing? So then now she takes me over to my mom, who was teaching right down the hall. And then they start arguing over top of my head. And my mom is like, well, what do you want me to do? And the lady said, well, you did my job. No one's going to be able to teach this kid, and other kids aren't going to like him. So then my mom said, well, what you want me to do? You want me to make this kid stupid so you feel better about yourself? Because my mom was gangster. And then after that altercation, they made this decision that I would just sit in the back of class and read books and not talk to anybody. And so that's how I was hanging out in kindergarten. So when we got home, I asked my mom, well, Mom, why is my teacher mad at me? My mom said, because your teacher's stupid. Because my mom, again, was gangster. And then I said, well, who taught my teacher what she knows? And my mom said, her teacher. And I said, well, who taught her teachers? And she said, their teachers. So then I said, well, who taught the first teachers? And she said, God, I guess. And I said, huh. Well, I guess from now on, that's who I want to learn from. And ever since then, I have always had this thing inside of me where I wanted to go to the source. And so I'm going to share this passage with you from the Bible that isn't taught a lot. It's from Ephesians 3. And it says, for this reason, and this is Paul praying. So he says, for this reason, I kneel before the Creator, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. And I could talk about that all day about the name. I'm not going to get into it now. He says, I pray out of God's glorious riches that you may be strengthened with the power through the Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all of God's holy people to grasp how wide and how long and how high and how deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses all knowledge. And here's the kicker, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God, or to the measure of all the fullness of God. And then he prays on to say, the one who's able to do immeasurably more than we can ask and imagine, may that power be working within us. Now, I read this when I was young too, because I used to love reading the Bible. I was a Bible nerd. I used to carry around 2 New Testaments. I bought a microscopic Bible that I used to carry around and use a magnifying lens to read that joint. I bought a kid's Bible with comic books with my own money because I wanted to know God deeply, right? So, given all of this, when I read passages like this, I took it seriously. I took that it was possible through love for me to know the fullness of God, for the fullness of God to dwell within me. I took these prayers seriously, right? But because I took these prayers seriously, just like in the kids in my class who didn't like me because my teacher said that I made them feel bad about themselves, it turned out that the same thing happened in faith communities where I truly believed that we were supposed to be filled with all the fullness of God. And because I believed that, that's what I projected out onto the world. I believed that that was my inheritance. And then I projected that onto everyone else, that that's our inheritance. And I still believe that. But I've come to understand that many of us, when we feel undeserving, when we feel that we are guilty or shamed or any of these things, we don't allow ourselves to receive this fullness. And so now my appeal to you, my invitation to you is for you to let yourself be taught by God. I was telling my daughter yesterday, who's only 8 years old, I told her, you got access to the mind of God. And I told her, when you experience things, because sometimes she don't like learning, right? She don't like school. She's like, don't teach me stuff outside of class. And I try to respect her boundaries. But I told her, you have access to all these things. And when you read or study or whatever like that, you're not learning something you don't know. You're remembering what you do know because you have access to this divine mind, this consciousness. And for a long time, I stopped talking like that because I was in circles where people didn't want to hear it. But now I find myself in circles where I can talk like that more openly again. And I'm taking it upon myself to do that in spaces like this with you, T. Ree and Marge and RM and Margaret and whoever may check this out later. I want to project the fullness of God and the fullness of love into everything. But in order for me to project that, I have to receive that. And then I want to be a reminder to folks that you came into this world full of wonder, full of joy, full of imagination, full of beauty, and that has never been taken away from you. You have been lied to. Most of us have been lied to. And a lot of that lies comes from the church because they tell you that you're less than, that it's something, excuse me, something you got to earn to be who you already are. But I submit to you that all we have to do is remember who we are and to allow ourselves to be taught by God. People are going to fail you. I'm going to fail you. I've had people get bothered with me for saying stuff that I thought was positive and they just took it whatever way they wanted to take it. They projected onto the situation whatever was inside of them. But if I told them that, they would just get mad. So all I can do is try to project that beauty and that goodness on them. And if I can't do that, then I need to get away from them. That's what I do. But my invitation to you is to love yourself. Know that you're loved. Know that you have access to the mind of God. Know that you are amazing and that you wouldn't be here if every particle of the universe didn't agree to you being here. If I haven't said it before, I'll say it now. Everything in all of creation has already said yes to you. Your work here is to say yes to yourself. This Sunday, the 21st at 9:11 Mountain Time. Well, I should say 11. I'm going to be talking here at the Unity Columbine Spiritual Center on joy. And what I'm going to invite people into in that conversation, and thank you, T. What I'm inviting people in that conversation is to consider this story of they call him the prodigal son. And the way you hear that story, you think, okay, this dude messed up and his dad forgave him, yada, yada, yada. But what I want to focus on is when that person was forgiven, quote unquote, because I don't even think that father blamed him. There was a joy that's incomparable because sometimes we don't know what we have until it's gone or we think it's gone. And when we get it back, there's a joy that comes. It's just like if you lose something and then you find out you didn't lose that thing, you love it even more than when you had it in your possession. And so this invitation is to connect with that joy. So my invitation to you is if you have time, come and check us out at 11 a.m. this Sunday, Mountain Time, and just talk about this conversation about joy and to allow yourself to receive this joy because this is your inheritance. And with that, I'm going to bless you. Thank you for spending time with me. If you get something out of this and you know people who may be served by this, then share it because there's a lot of things out here that are telling you what you aren't. And this is the invitation to remember who you are. Peace.